In the previous video, we learned how to set up and tear down. In this video, we're going to have a look at how we can create a test and then use XCAssert to validate the code. So we'll start by creating our own first test. And then we'll have a look at XCAssert and what it does to allow us to understand whether the code works or not. And we'll also have a look at the different XCAssert methods available to us. We'll take a look at code coverage reports, which report on how much of our code is covered when we run our unit tests. So we'll understand why it is that we use code coverage. And then we'll allow the scheme to begin gathering code coverage data on our unit tests. And finally, we'll review a code coverage report and what it looks like and what it means. In the previous video, we set up and tore down our object using a transient core data process. So let's create our first test. When you're running your unit tests, you need to start every method with the small case test. And then you can put a description in, such as test performance example that we have here. So I'll create a new method and I'm going to call this test populate dream. Within this, I'm then going to take the dream and I'm going to populate it with our object that we created at the top. In order to validate whether something is true or not, we use the XCAssert. There are a number of different XCAsserts. There's this XCAssert nil, not nil, equal, etc. Let's use XCAssert and we'll pass in a Boolean value, which will be dream.name is equal to, and then we'll take the Sydney Opera House from above, copy this and paste this into here, and we'll create another XCAssert, just checking to see whether when we created the state, whether that was true. So we'll put XCAssert dream.state is equal to dreamState.none. And now to run our unit test, we press Command U and it builds and runs our unit test. And as you can see, we've successfully passed our tests. However, not all tests are as simple as just simply populating a dataset and checking to see if the value is true. Sometimes we have to run asynchronous tasks within our tests, and for this purpose, we need to create expectations. So let's create an asynchronous test. So I'll create func test image view with URL. Within here, I'll populate my dream as we did before with the object. Then I'll create an image view and just initialize that as an image view. And here, I'll create an expectation. You use the expectation with description and give it a description. Expectations are exactly as they sound. They expect something to happen, and the way that this happens is for it to be fulfilled or not. We'll do imageview.setImage with URL. And we'll pass across an NSURL made up of the image link. Then we'll take the image, error, and cache. And within this block of code, we'll assert that the image view image is not nil whenever this is finished setting the image. And then we'll fulfill this expectation, which tells the expectation that what we were waiting for has happened. The final piece of code is that we set a wait for expectation. So let's create wait for expectations with timeout 30, which will give us 30 seconds to fulfill this expectation. If there's an error, then we'll print that error. Now let's press Command U to run our tests, and we've set our image within the image view. And that's it. Now we're testing both synchronously and asynchronously. Unit tests are a fantastic way to test your code base to ensure that you've got all of the right information in the right places. They're great for testing models and helper classes, and it's wonderful to understand the safety and security that you get from testing to make sure that you have actually got a very stable code base. However, it was difficult to understand in previous versions of Xcode how much of your code base was actually covered by your tests. But with the advent of Xcode 7, we are now able to get access to code coverage reports which tell us how much of each class, method, and the whole code base is actually covered by the tests that you've written. So let's see how we can actually get access to these code coverage reports. Setting code coverage reports up is actually extremely simple. And the way we do this is that we can go into our scheme. Let's go to this and then click Edit Scheme. Then go to our test, and then we can click this small checkbox which says Gather Coverage Data. When I click this, this will then actually populate a coverage report. So let's run our test and see how we get access to this. I run my tests, they all pass. Now, I'm going to jump up to this test inspector. I'm going to select a test and then I'll right click on it and click Jump to Report. Now, I've got access to the coverage report which I see in between tests and logs. So I can go into this file and I can go have a look at all of the different classes that are being impacted by my test report. And straight away I can see that I've got a significant proportion of my dream class covered and a fair amount of my core data manager. but there's a number of different controllers which I'm not even touching at all. Which means that if I want to cover more of my codebase to ensure that I have greater stability, then I'm going to want to write more tests around these. And for anything that feels untestable, I might want to break this out into smaller chunks and different methods so that I can test it and make sure I've got more rigorous testing and greater stability. For more information around code coverage, please check out the developer site on apple.com, which has some great information around code coverage as well as unit testing in general. So now we have all of our unit tests done. Let's have a look at how we can create UI tests using Xcode to record it.